Hello, so
That's so weird. I can't. Oh yeah, I can see you now.
I'll just get that light spill. You see, finest Victorian high-tech shutters.
Very cool. I'm just updating the website for Visual Meadow. I've turned most of it into an FAQ.
Yeah. Sorry, just clean the screen a bit. Using Dad's hanky. There we go.
Are you okay?
Sorry?
Are you okay?
Yeah. Sorry, I just got a sort of slight phlegm on the chest, so sorry about all the coughing. I'll get there.
Good. Yeah, so yeah, on the page, I've just removed a lot of stuff and hidden it in a FAQ.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, in the sense, this is all annoying and predictable stuff in that you hit this sort of loop where someone's saying, oh, it's too much to read, it's too hard. So you take it out and say, well, it's not been explained. You think, oh, for God's sakes, just give it a try.
Exactly. So I'm just moving one more section out. That's why I may not be looking like I'm paying as much attention as I should. Yeah, it was good to see Dave this morning.
Yeah. I think the thing with the things like the visual meta, the thing is to do whatever it takes to just get it in there. Because the lesson I learned a while back is to not engage in the argument until the people are using the damn thing, at which time you pull the curtain back and say, aha, it's too late, you're already on board. At which point most people actually frankly roll over it, because I find a lot of the tire kicking is just, it's not what I recognized. You know, it's a bit like getting kids to eat a vegetable they've not seen before. It normally evokes instant dislike, and you have to say, well, you know, have you tried it? Maybe you might like it.
Yeah, exactly. There's the old adage, don't tell them, show them.
Yeah. Well, God, must be as muggy as anything down here. I don't know what it's like with you.
It is quite muggy. We went out yesterday for lunch. It turned out to be a Thai place. Food was okay, but it was really, really rainy, you know, and we were sitting inside, but it was semi-opened, and because it was so humid, it was warm. It really felt like Southeast Asia. Because,
but probably not in a good way.
No, it was really nice, actually. It's because the smells are much stronger when it's humid, so it kind of had that.
No, it's quite funny. I was on the Tinderbox call last Saturday, and people were saying, you know, it's some insane figure. And I've been listening to this for a while. I pointed out, I said, you know, we're nudging here into the 30s here in Britain, and it's decidedly uncomfortable. You know, they fell back because I don't know, the poor people up in the northwest, I think, are absolutely baking at the moment.
Yeah. Where's everybody else today? Oh, Peter's here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi.
Well, I'm making very good headway on the parser. I built a testbed platform that simultaneously rebuilds the grammar every time I make a grammar edit and applies that to the 3 sample pieces of Visual Meta so that I can instantaneously see the results of the parser on all 3 files as I'm making changes.
Let me end the call and start. Actually, no, I'll just edit it later because Mark and I was just huffing about for a bit. No, we'll leave it in. That's very good news. Have you seen the small changes we made on the website?
Not yet.
Okay, let's have a look at that together. But did you see the email that I sent to Vince? Because I referred to your errata in it.
No, I haven't checked mail for a couple days. It's been a hectic weekend.
Oh, well, read it when you have a chance. So, okay, on the new webpage now, updated a bit. There's an introduction, traditional book, visual meta approach, FAQ, and then a little bit of a why underneath. It further needs editing, no question. But the how can I implement visual meta has a basic kind of page like this. And then on the structure page, can you see this, Peter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. So we have the visual meta start and visual meta end. In between that, we have visual meta header start, visual meta BibTeX self-citation start, and then in the extensions, author details, and in the different reference, what?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, and in the headings, this is what I was going to say. This is the new way of doing it. Doesn't that make more sense? Instead of the JSON weirdness.
Yeah, that looks good.
And the conversation we were having in our sort of lab group this morning with Dave Mellon, is to a certain extent, I think if you take the long-term view, the fact that we're going through the hoops of writing this in what looks like, you know, BibTeX or whatever, is really to get us to the point where, you know, once and if this is adopted, people will eventually say, no, what we need is X, and it'll be implemented with all this from the ground up, and all this sort of old syntax will doubtless be swept away. But I think it helps us get us to the point where people start building something really from new, informed by the right things.
So on this page here, we have a comma after the name, not after the other one. Should we have that, or how should this really be?
Yes, because it's a set. So what you've got there is your first set of curly brackets enclose, in this case, 3 or 4 tags, yeah, which are a list of tags. So everything except normally the last one has a comma, and if you've got a halfway decent parser, it'll cope with the fact that there's an empty.
Should I have the commas or not?
Yes, I think it would make more sense.
On all of them?
Yeah, because as I say, each of those, if you think of it like.
Okay, yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah. But I
but usually not the last one.
Not the last one, because there's nothing after it.
That would confuse people, and they'd make them think that the data wasn't coming through completely and they lost a bit of something.
And really most of this really is us being defensive against somebody putting it through something that's tried to read JSON, through BibTeX or LaTeX or whatever, and wraps its hand in because it's found something it didn't like, which it wasn't going to use anyway.
No, that's fine, that's fine. But I have another question. That is, should we consider putting it more on one line? Is that possible? This is very space inefficient now.
Yeah, the white space is totally irrelevant from a parsing perspective. I just have a single rule that absorbs all white space and throws it away.
Yeah, and you know, we can put a notation somewhere that says, you know, this is being done for, because one of the things we don't want to do is have a really heavy use of white space in something that we're printing on the end of the document. So that your one space memo doesn't and then have 20 pages of sort of print attached to the end, which is all the visual meta.
Give it to him gently, right? Because Yeah, in this FAQ implement, we have this thing here. I have the errata bit here, but
Also, I want to let you know that I was able to integrate the offline version of the IPFS hashing system with my parser code so that I'll be able to automatically generate the correct ID that corresponds to the files.
oh, the ID thing is really, really important.
Yes, I'm working on it. Also, I've been able to pull in a pre-existing BibTeX parser that I'll apply to the pure BibTeX sections and see how that turns out. But that'll take a couple days because I have a whole bunch of doctor's appointments to drive the folks to this week.
Peter, while you're here and sort of no one else, actually a question you might answer, because I think you're more familiar with LaTeX as a whole than I am, is I'd said to Freud, I'd suggested that we didn't use underscores in the tags because I know that in some contexts of LaTeX, particularly URLs, well, because an underscore I think is either a line break or a line continuation character in LaTeX. And I've found that some tools just get exercised if I have an underscore in something and I don't escape it. And so I thought it would be kind of weird if we ended up having tags where we had to underscore part of the tag name, but I may be wrong. So do you have a view on that?
Not offhand. I have to play with the actual tools, but if you found tools that are breaking on that, then we definitely should avoid it, even if the tools are the things that are wrong, because people who see a tool breaking on our source are going to assume we're to blame and not the tool makers to blame.
Well, that's exactly my thought. So this,
I totally agree with you,
entirely
Mark.
Pragmatism.
Yes, you're thinking the right way.
Yeah, because I mean, as I found to my horror, really, the more I dig into BibTeX, it's so permissive in a way that it's really hard to write any firm rules. Plus the fact that there are now at least three or four sort of discrete religious, People's Front of Judea and whatnot, who are all using a different version of it and very happy doing so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm running around pulling as much BibTeX documentation. I found a guide to style authors that goes into an even more messy detail. So I'll be plodding through all that. But at the moment, I'm just going to be delegating it to the existing BibTeX NPM module that everybody seems to be standardizing around.
I was interesting because I did think you're the one person I might know who might have written a BibTeX style, which looks a bit above my pay grade, but it's something that
I have some custom BibTeX styles I was doing for my textbook project that sort of got backburnered when I had to write my LaTeX parser project, which I then backburnered to write my better front end than using LaTeX explicitly project. Because
I mean, it did occur to me, it may be, depending on how quickly this, well, we assume it's going to go ahead and how quickly it's pulled through, is that we may find that we actually end up wanting to have affect what amounts to a BibTeX style file so that we can draw out some of our own effectively custom BibTeX and use it in an interactive or useful way.
Definitely, that's a great idea. I'll get on that after I have the parser and the parser integrated with the visualization. But yes, I definitely agree with you.
Great crime. I'll get right on that.
I'm a chronic yak shaver, as you can tell.
By the way, did you have any joy finding the RSS feed bits in ATBRef?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I really like how Frode's going. I think we're making the right design decisions. And like you were saying, Mark, we have to recognize that there are a whole bunch of broken tools that people are going to assume because they've been around longer than us are correct. It's better not to trip over.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that at the sort of at the high level support, people have got the idea. Our next problem is to get it past the middle managers, whose job is to say, I don't want to do any extra work. Thank you very much. So this becomes, from experience, now this becomes a game of stealth. So in other words, so that at the appropriate moment you can tear back the curtain and say, no more complaints allowed. You're already using it.
And I've also noticed that a couple of different academic groups are suddenly starting to be talking about wanting to standardize and pool bibliographic data. So I think our timing is really good. Yeah, great job, Frode, on getting this through the door.
Thank you.
And I sort of like the sense that the other thing it's opening up, what I find really interesting was the discussions we had in this forum. And when we were playing around with the data set earlier, and the sort of sense of what new can we do with this? Whereas in some more academic settings, the response sort of tended to come back and said, well, this is useful for finding, it's quite clear that the first thing everyone did was use it for ego surfing. And I thought, oh dear, what a tragedy, because I think it's worth a bit more than that. So that, funnily enough, I think the academic side is more inward looking, but I think, when you pull together all these strands and the stuff going back to sort of Doug's idea of these much more sort of rich documents, and some of the notions we've talked about of doing a degree of calculation, I think this gets really exciting. Plus the fact that in what we've effectively been discussing is you're building data sets on the fly or enhancing data sets on the fly based on information you may have on your system, which I think is pretty neat. Because the sad truth is actually not all of us are connected all the time to the internet.
Yeah.
Well, we're definitely asking the right questions and taking a pragmatic view of it. So many people just will go off and they'll create a pristine, crystallized, here is the ultimate thing, and they won't think about any of the innovation, fusion issues, and technology transfer, and getting it so it'll be acceptable to the people who are making the decisions.
Well, it's quite nice also. I've just been asked out of the blue for the human workshop, Human 21 this year at Hypertext. Klaus Atzenberg asked if I demo Microcosm. So I'm going to try and get one of the team who built it to actually sort of lead on that. But again, that's really interesting for the link-based work it did.
Can that still be run? And what does it take to run it?
Oh, there is a repository on, sadly, due to Mr. Microsoft wanting to insist on a license for a software they no longer support. I can't send you the built, well, I'm very happy to give you a drop copy, but wow. Anyway, the thing is, as long as you have a valid copy of Windows XP, then all is kosher. But because Windows XP is about the last OS on which it runs, and then I use VirtualBox, made it XP, installed it onto XP, and there is a running version of that, which actually I might be able to demo here, except I think it might just pull my machine over if I run VirtualBox as well as Zoom and everything. But yeah, I have it. And what's missing at the moment? So I did it as a sort of holiday project while studying in the lab when we had our research fest, so that at least there is now a running copy that you can look at. It was this close to dying because when I came to do it, the one thing we didn't have was the license code. And there's no license code server. And luckily, somebody found a post-it on the back of something at the bottom of their broom cupboard. But if we hadn't have had that, the whole that would have been another tool that's been lost to history.
I think the last copy of XP that I had operational was a copy running inside of Microsoft's virtual machine, inside of another version of Windows. It was like 2 levels down in emulation.
Yeah, it's very annoying that, I mean, I did spend a lot of time trying to find that. I thought there has to be a sort of department at Microsoft where you can ring up and say, look, I'm a bona fide academic. This is what I'm doing. I want to run this. Can you give me a sort of sign off? This is all right. And then I'm not then going to use it to run, a whole host of Bitcoin mining machines or something. But all I could find was people who wanted to sell me more Microsoft software, which wasn't what I was after at all. So that's, that's another interesting thing that at some point somebody's going to have to take charge of. The other thing that is floating around is I had a copy of the book on Hyper-G which is about the same time as Microcosm, which
I
was
have that Hyper-G book.
yeah. Well, I'm not enough of it. It's early. It's another of these things written in early Unix, Unix fairly early on, and I think it may be possible to get it going because we tried to find note cards, but that I think is gone unless somebody finds someone. The early visual tools of Wiki and VKB are probably gone because the server that had all the files on it died, and I don't. And apart from a sort of running copy that somebody's got, but there's no installer anymore. And again, it was written in. Sorry, I didn't mean early Java. It's early Java, which apparently is a bit of a nightmare to work with. So unless in other words, you understand all the horrors of that, you still then got to look at a sort of a tool that wasn't written at the time for the long term. But there are one or two of us around who are trying to, keep one or two of these things running, because just being able to see the things actually being used is good. So did you see Norm Meyewitz's demo of Intermedia?
No.
Okay, so on ACM, it was done as part of the Human 20 workshop, and Norm Meyerowitz he's got Intermedia running on some emulator or just on an old system, and was talking about it and actually showing it live, which is quite good. Because they do, Brown University they've got a FRES simulator. After they figured out they had to remove some of the memory from the virtual environment, it started running all right, which I thought was a nice little touch.
We really need Congress to amend the Copyright Act to explicitly say, if you're dealing with a system that no one's selling, that hasn't been sold for more than X number of years, any way you can get it working for the benefit of humanity, go for it. It's a fair use. But no one wants to specify what a fair use is. It's so annoying. They just leave this for the courts. And unfortunately, the natural reaction of an academic is, I don't want to be the test case, because what if I get a flaky judge who doesn't understand what I'm trying to do, who just reflexively, more intellectual property, the better, lock everything down.
Well, all these things are difficult. So, I mean, I've now sort of put a license with the README for the data set that I've made. And it's quite difficult. I mean, I've done it on a sort of share alike, no commercial attribution, Creative Commons license, which I think is about right. But the loose part in it is I have actually drawn information. Most of it is publicly available on the ACM website. And what we're doing falls within the sort of fair use that I think you can take out of that. But the 1990 articles, I had to transcribe from a paper, a book copy of ECHT 90, which is no longer in print. It's no longer, well, it's kind of thing that there's a thing on the Cambridge Union site saying, if you want to pay us money, we might make an ebook of it. So in other words, it's buried. I mean, it's really hard to find even on their backlists. Because that's another interesting point in this I've discovered, is that just in the way that when you go and search Getty Pictures, you're not actually, it's so big, you're not actually searching Getty Pictures. They rotate the content that's actually available for public search. In the same way, a lot of the publishers just don't list their backlist. So you actually need to go to something like a library or WorldCat or something to find out the bibliographic information about.
Yeah, WorldCat's usually my first stop.
I have questions for you guys now.
Yep.
Okay.
Or are you in the flow of something? Because I'm actually happy to wait.
No. We were just
good.
filling in.
We were rambling.
So the thing that we're cheekily trying to smuggle in is the VMID, which Mr. Anderson has told me to change, no underscore. Sorry, this sample didn't have it. I'll fix that now. But here's the question. The difference between one that has a logical name, that is date and author name. Oops. So this should be. It's that many characters. And the one that is appended. Oh, why is this different? Sorry.
Yeah, the two should be the same, yeah. I made that mistake when I was doing my work-throughs.
There was a comma there. So yeah, so that's one problem. The other question is if it's
You need another brace off. You need a comma after series HT20. Now go down. Yeah, comma after that.
I think we might be circling back to Doug's distinction between having an ID associated with a point in a document outline versus an ID associated with a particular paragraph that can move around with the paragraph. And in one sense, you want to have an ID that represents the paper as an abstraction that might be subject to editing and amendment versus the exact version of the paper at this point in time that you can run through a crypto hash and be guaranteed to pull back the exact same PDF that you threw into it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, librarians have been having to deal with, there's some people who are working on old manuscripts and things. I think this is all, funnily enough, is all familiar stuff. They might not be thinking of it in terms of computer hashes and things, but the fact is, it's Shakespeare's folio, but which one, and which annotation of which one.
Exactly.
So that's
with Visual Meta with the commas. If the commas are optional, you could wind up with getting a different hash of the exact same underlying Visual Meta content, which means that you have to create the hash on the content after you've parsed it so that you can throw away all of that optional white space and optional delimiter variation that would otherwise cause one piece of identical Visual Meta in a couple different renderings to look like it's different pieces of Visual Meta.
Yeah, but the Visual Meta is going to be out of it anyway, because you can't add anything after it's hashed. So the Visual Meta, so the ID with the hash would be the document. Then after that, you append Visual Meta, right?
Right. The crypto hash would be the final PDF camera ready that's going into the ACM database.
Yeah.
Then we'd also have a second hash on all the Visual Meta content so that you could distinguish one version of Visual Meta attached to that particular file from another version of Visual Meta. So you know that both pieces of Visual Meta were talking about the same physical file, the exact same bit perfect copy of the file. However, those two pieces of Visual Meta themselves have variations, so you could intelligently try to merge them or look for the errata field and overwrite the earlier one based on the errata field in the more recent one.
Right. So, but the question I have for you guys now is, we have VM ID is the number and the author name.
Yep.
But then if we are doing it to a document that exists, we have VM IP appended, which is the hash and so on. So my question is, what is the benefit? Because there is some, but should we maybe, if we create the document ourselves, should we maybe have both? Because I think it speaks a little bit to what Peter's saying. They actually say different things.
Yeah, the only thing is that you can't hand create the crypto hash ID without having the correct tools installed on your system, whereas you can figure out what time it is easily and figure out the name of the author easily. So I think the distinction is whether or not you need automated support to generate the different IDs. Now, we can certainly release a piece of code that could be run on any system that someone has JavaScript installed on, or whatever programming language we want to translate it to. Or we could have a web service that could generate those IDs for you by being handed the piece of Visual Meta. So in that case, but what wouldn't work is
not the Visual Meta. The key thing is we have to have an ID for the document. Okay.
Right. And the document, that has to be done locally, because otherwise you're going to get into situations where ACM isn't going to want to have their core documents exposed to the interplanetary file system, but they might be willing to hash them locally to generate that. Or if you're a digital library user and you have a copy of the PDF, you could generate that if ACM wasn't willing to do it. So that could be part of client applications, I think, on handling that hashing issue.
I think it's also a hard thing at this point, because for a lot of people in the room, they won't really be able to, until someone's showing them the problem that arises, all the things that Peter has quite eloquently just sort of taken us through. A lot of people just won't get what that means until someone can say, this piece of paper here is not this, So again, I think we just need to be a bit pragmatic. I think we're making reasonable accommodations as we go. And I suppose the way I look at it is, the way I sort of ask the question is, am I doing something now that's going to bite me later? If it's something that I need to do later, but I can still do later without it breaking what we've got now, I'm sort of less concerned.
What we could do is, instead of hashing on the PDF file, we could hash on the Visual Meta self-citation, which would have the DOI to the file that someone could go through whatever paywall or that whatever they have to do. And that wouldn't get in the way of our locally generating that hash information then.
Yeah, because this is an interesting thing, because potentially this can spiral quite a lot, because we've got two things that almost drag these notions sort of in different directions. So we want to do things like to be able to go to this version of the document and to this point in it, because we want to make a very close reference. At the same time, if everyone who refers to the document makes their own hash of it, we've got an awful lot of stuff floating around there, probably which has massive redundancy, but there isn't an easy way to do that. And that's an area I don't get, but I suspect that someone probably in an unrelated area has had to deal with this, and there may be a way to resolve it. So I would flag it as a potential problem, but not one we should worry unduly with at this point.
And then there's the problem of linking the canonical self-citation information with the freely available preprint copy that we're able to find on the researcher's personal webpage. So you have all those final document as submitted that people are allowed to share, which for anyone outside of an institutional setting who can't feed the DOI in to get the final publishing house's version would be able to use to get the document. And I think that's especially an issue for people in the third world and people who don't have access to all of the first world infrastructure that we do, where they could go to the website of the faculty member and find his submitted version of Paper X. And you're going to want to have a way of associating that with the officially published version, both so that it gets credited and so that you know that you're talking about the same thing.
I think that's incredibly important too, for another reason, which is as all this moves forward and we start to think about the sort of the digital tools or data structures that might be written influenced by all this, in other words, starting from the ground up with having worked out some of the sort of structure, is this interplay that we will have for quite some time between intellectual property ownership and just having a canonical source, because as Peter rightly says, it's a big deal if you're outside the big tent and you're in some parts of the world where you don't have a library budget, and you're having to be quite creative just to acquire knowledge. And I say that, and that's without breaking everyone else's rice bowls just because it's too difficult to cope with. I thoroughly respect that at the moment. That's some people's job is to own this IP, and that's a whole different ballgame to resolve. But if our system allows us to sort of ride those two things, again, that will be remarkably useful going forward.
Guys, is it okay if I leave a bit early? We are not in a rush for anything, right?
No.
No.
Okay, cool. If you can please, both of you, have a look at the new visualmeta.info webpage and tell me if you have any major issues. I'm just trying to make it super clear so no one has the excuse that they didn't get it. Any feedback, as you know, would be very welcome.
Right, now integrate into the parser.
You see,
Yeah.
maybe
And it should.
Kyle, you want to say?
And hopefully soon.
Anyway,
hello. Hopefully soon I'll have if an ePrints URL, if not a DOI, for a version of the data set that's pretty much everything that Adam's already using, which would just be useful if people want to pass that around as well.
Okay, cool. All right. So
And I'll try to integrate the parser with the data set visualization so you could drop new visual meta on it and then have those sources get integrated into the visualization.
Look
So I
forward.
think where we want to be headed for the demo.
Wonderful. Okay, see you on Friday, guys. Bye.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
see you Friday, Frode.